So that movie clip you just saw is Pip navigating the, quote, ugly, crooked, narrow, and dirty streets of London. We are now in part 2 of Great Expectations. You're a third of the way through, and this is Pip's infamous sin stage, where he is in pursuit of money. He has rejected his homegrown values of Kent, and he's seeking to become a gentleman. London is the perfect setting for this. The objective correlative of London during the Industrial Revolution is that it's sooty, it's dirty, it's crowded, it's corrupt, and that's going to parallel what's going on in Pip's soul and character as he pursues a life of wealth. And so when he first arrives to London, he looks for Jaggers' office, and when he gets there, he's seated there by himself waiting for Jaggers. Now remember, Jaggers is Joe's foil. Jaggers is Pip's new guardian in London, and he is brusque. He's a very successful, intelligent, but not compassionate lawyer. He's rich, and he doesn't have a lot of extra time. So as a result, he is going to have Wemmick, John Wemmick is Jaggers' clerk, interact more with Pip for the day-to-day stuff, and then Pip will reunite with Jaggers as necessary. Jaggers has been hired by Pip's secret benefactor, and so that's the connection there. But when Pip is waiting for Jaggers in his office, we get a lot of parallel imagery to Miss Havisham's house. So it's weird. This relationship that Pip has with Jaggers might be emblematic of another metaphorical prison for Pip, like Miss Havisham has imprisoned herself in her home, and there's death imagery. So at the bottom of page 172, Mr. Jaggers' room was lighted by a skylight only and was the most dismal place. So not a lot of natural light in Jaggers' office, and very dismal. He notices there's a sword, several strange-looking boxes, 2 dreadful casts on a shelf of faces peculiarly swollen. So those are actual heads of former clients of Jaggers that he's had cast and bronzed, and he has them on his shelf to look at. It's a strange decoration. And then he notices that Jaggers' chair looks like a coffin with its row of brass nails around it, and he can see the grease stain of from where Jaggers' clients have been pushed up against the wall. He can see a greasy silhouette on the wall. So this is a really creepy atmosphere, and it looks like Jaggers is the kind of lawyer who rules by intimidation. So Pip gets up and leaves the office because Jaggers hasn't returned yet, and he goes outside and around the corner, where he encounters a drunk minister of justice who's trying to recruit Pip to come in and watch a scene in the courthouse. And there's also the debtor's door, where culprits would come to be hanged. Dickens is using London as an opportunity to give out some social commentary against the judicial system of the time period. You might recall we've talked about how Dickens' father was arrested for debt, and Dickens himself had to drop out of school at age 12 to help for the family. And so here, if people are being hanged for owing money, then that seems rather draconian, and Dickens is definitely taking this moment to speak out against that. So when Pip returns to what's called Little Britain, that's the borough where Jaggers' office is, he hears and sees some of Jaggers' other clients, and the question that's repeated is, have you paid Wemmick? Have you paid Wemmick? Have you paid Wemmick? Unlike Joe, Jaggers is all about the money. He's not going to help you until he gets paid, and that seems to be his driving force here. So just sort of keep that in mind. He's got his forefinger idiosyncrasy that he's pointing at all of these people. And the chapter ends on page 179 with Jaggers making a prediction. He says to Pip, "You'll find your credit good, Mr. Pip," meaning you've got a lot of money. He says, "I shall by this means be able to check your bills or pull you up if I find you outrunning the constable. Of course, you'll go wrong somehow, but that's no fault of mine." So like a lot of people who first come into money and then blow it because they don't know how to budget or be scrupulous with their money, that's what Jaggers is predicting for Pip, that Pip is encountering all of a sudden this money and that he's going to mess it up. So a little bit of foreshadowing there. Chapter 21, Wemmick, Jaggers' clerk, takes Pip to his place of lodging. So remember, Pip has a tutor, Matthew Pocket. It's Miss Havisham's cousin. He lives in London. Actually, he lives in Hammersmith, which is 5 miles, I can't remember if it's east or west of London. And then in London is a little lodging place called Barnard's Inn. And that's where Matthew Pocket's son lives, and that's going to be Pip's roommate. And so he's getting all this information from Wemmick. Now, Wemmick is very stiff and awkward. When Pip tries to shake his hand, Wemmick just looks at it and he's like, oh, are we in the custom of shaking hands? But this is not Wemmick's full character. We're only seeing work Wemmick right now, how Wemmick acts when he's on duty as Mr. Jagger's clerk. He's all business. And you'll see a repetition of this idiosyncrasy that he has a post office mouth. All that means is that Wemmick doesn't smile, and his mouth is like the slit you might put an envelope in for the mail. So like this. Okay, so that's Wemmick's characterization at this point. But we'll get to know him better. At the bottom of page 182, Wemmick says, as I keep the cash, we shall likely meet pretty often. Good day. So, you know, Pip is going to get to know Wemmick on a deeper level, so we can look forward to that. We're going to end up loving his character. Now, while Pip is standing there, he's waiting for Matthew Pocket Jr. or Mr. Pocket Jr., in other words, his name is Herbert, to arrive. And when he comes in, he lets him in, and of course Barnard's Inn is yet another disappointing, does not meet Pip's expectations, place of lodging. There's not a lot of furniture, and Herbert makes it clear that Matthew Pocket hasn't given money to him. We'll find out why later. But anyway, he's such a nice guy, and he's handing grocery bags, you know, for Pip to hold, and all of a sudden they have this epiphany that they recognize one another. Think about someone you knew in elementary school, and then the next thing you know, you see them maybe freshman year of college, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's you know? So this epiphany is on page 185, and it's likely to be the cliffhanger that Dickens would have left that week's installment on. But Herbert says, Lord bless me, you're the prowling boy. And Pip says, and you are the pale young gentleman. In other words, Pip's roommate is going to be the kid he beat up in chapter 11. And this kid is Matthew Pocket's son. So everyone, all of Miss Havisham's relatives were there that day, bad-mouthing Matthew. Meanwhile, Matthew Pocket's son is outside and set up to fight Pip deliberately to see who's going to win Estella. So let me pause here for a movie clip, and I'll be right back.
Mr. Pip?
Mr. Pocket?
I'm extremely sorry. But I thought that, coming from the country, you might like a little fruit. Oh. Strawberries. Oh, strawberry jam. Have you seen your lodgings?
No.
They're by no means splendid, but I'm sure that we shan't come to blows. Put them up. Come on. Come on. Come on. Stand your ground. Regular rules apply.
I beg your pardon?
The prowling boy.
The pale young gentleman.
I was there with my Aunt Sarah on a trial visit.
All right, so I've come to my son Timothy's room to talk about chapter 22 because so much information is revealed about Miss Havisham and why her clocks are stopped at 8:40. So please listen very carefully, especially at the end of this video, because there's something that I think you need to know. So chapter 22 is page 185, and obviously we've reached this epiphany of Herbert and Pip. Herbert is such a nice guy. He's going to be very good-natured and kind, and throughout this chapter, to build suspense, he's correcting Pip's table manners. So I'm going to skip through all of that, but just know that Herbert's being, trying to be nice, like, oh, don't stick the knife in your mouth. So those are details that prolong the revelation of Miss Havisham's story. We find out a couple of things. On page 186, we find out that Estella is adopted. So she's not Miss Havisham's niece, as might have been previously assumed. She's not Miss Havisham's daughter. She is adopted. So hold that thought. Estella is another orphan, just like Pip, just like Biddy, okay? We find out that Mr. Jaggers is Miss Havisham's, quote, man of business and solicitor, and he has her confidence when no one else has. So, in other words, Mr. Jaggers is Miss Havisham's lawyer. Why she needs a rich London lawyer, I don't know. We'll find out more about that later. We also obviously connect further that Matthew Pocket, Herbert's dad, is Miss Havisham's cousin. But here's where it gets really interesting. So, oh, and let me pause 1 second. Herbert changes Pip's name, which is breaking the rules. Remember, Pip's not supposed to go by any other name other than Pip, and he's not supposed to inquire about who his benefactor is. And he's already essentially broken both of them. He assumes Miss Havisham is his benefactor, and Herbert's going to start calling Pip Handel. Handel is a famous composer who wrote the Harmonious Blacksmith, and Herbert says, we get along so well, and you used to be a blacksmith, so I'm just going to call you Handel. So just know that that's a nickname that Herbert has for Pip. But let me get to the good stuff. So on page 189, we find out that Miss Havisham was the daughter of a brewer. Okay, so looky here. I made a little chart for you. So Miss Havisham was the daughter, I'm trying to make this stable, of a man and a woman, mom and dad. Dad was a rich brewer, mom died. Miss Havisham was a spoiled child, okay? So when mom died, Dad married his cook. So he went and broke some social class rules and married his servant, ruh-roh. They had a child, a half-brother. So that, in other words, that's Miss Havisham's half-brother, okay? So Miss Havisham does have a relative. So this is all really interesting information. Now, when the half-brother turned out to be not that great, he was, quote, page 190, extravagant, undutiful, altogether bad. And so Miss Havisham's dad disinherited him, but then relented on his deathbed and gave him some money when he died. So Miss Havisham had the most money. Half-brother had some money. And of course, Miss Havisham inherited the brewery, and that's Satie's house where she lives. Now, at that same time, Miss Havisham starts dating this guy, and this is about 25 years ago. And this man pursued Miss Havisham closely and professed to be devoted to her. So she passionately loved him, but he was a con artist. He was trying to get her money. And so what he did was he worked in conjunction with the half-brother. So the fiance, who ended up leaving Miss Havisham at 8:40, we'll talk about that in a second, and the half-brother, they worked together in order to get money from Miss Havisham. So the half-brother bought out some of the shares of the brewery, and the fiance, they were working as a team, okay? And so the only person to warn Miss Havisham about this guy was Matthew Pocket, and that's why they haven't spoken in 25 years, but Miss Havisham swears he'll be back. Now, on the day of their wedding, Miss Havisham's getting ready, and she receives a letter on page 192, and Pip realizes, oh, she received it while she was dressing for her marriage at 20 minutes to 9, and that's why all the clocks are stopped. That's the moment she realized that her wedding wasn't going to happen. And she has never, says Herbert, seen the light of day. So she's trapped herself in this moment of just sadness that her fiance treated her this way. And turns out he was actually married to somebody else this whole time. So this is a complete con. But here's the thing. Herbert says the man to whom she gave her misplaced confidence acted throughout in concert with the half-brother. It was a conspiracy between them, and they shared the profits. This fiance was married already, and the two of them fell into deeper shame and degradation, if there can be any deeper, and ruin. Pip asks Herbert, are they alive now? And Herbert says, I don't know. So think about that. There's a fiance and a half-brother, and two men who have fallen into deeper shame and degradation, if there can be any deeper. What other two men do we know have been in deep shame and degradation? I hope you're thinking to yourself, convict 1 and convict 2 at this moment. I hope you're making that connection. In class, that would have been a fun moment. All right, well, I'm going to pause here. Even though the chapter is not over, I want to save it for the next video. What we find out is that Herbert has big dreams of becoming a ship insurer, but really he just works at a bank, accounting house, and he's broke. But they're going to head over to Matthew Pockett's home in Hammersmith, and we're going to see how the Pocket family lives. It's pretty interesting, but I'm going to save that for the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.